Hello, hello! Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and this is where I am reading through the enormous library books you see behind me. Okay, they're kind of falling off the shelves now. But then I give you a quick synopsis and tell you what I think about them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos. Let me know what you think in the comments. This month, we're in May 2024. I am learning more about libertarian principles. So this week's book is a classic on liberal thought, Liberalism by Ludwig von Mises. The accompanying cocktail is called The Liberal. Seemed appropriate. It is 1.5 ounces of whiskey, a 1/2 ounce of sweet vermouth, a 1/4 ounce of amaro liqueur, and 2 dashes of orange bitters. If you want to garnish it, that's going to be a lemon twist. I'm out of lemons, so no garnish for me. I rarely bother with garnish anyways. So let's do this. This book was initially published in 1927. 1927. It is fucking insane how prescient he was. The preface to my copy was written in 1962, so 62 years ago. Mises says, quote, "In England, the term liberal is mostly used to signify a program that only in details differs from the totalitarianism of socialists. In the United States, liberal means today a set of ideas and political postulates that in every regard are the opposite of all that liberalism meant to preceding generations." Basically, he's saying a bunch of fakes have stolen the term. We really need to take it back for those of us who, actually understand the concept of liberalism and what it means to be a free person. What does liberalism mean? Like actual liberalism, to be a liberal. So, liberalism is a political ideology that espouses liberal ideas. Well, what is liberal? And that's the sticking point. Because as Mises points out in the above statement, liberal today is not what the word originally meant. And originally, it meant freedom from government intervention in anything. And it still means, like the literal dictionary definition, if you look it up, willing to respect or accept behavior or opinions different from one's own, open to new ideas. That's what liberal actually means, okay? And then it gets real fun. Get my vermouth poured in here. This is going to be a bitter cocktail because rye whiskey tends towards a little bit bitter, and vermouth, even sweet vermouth, tends towards bitter. But amaro, Torani, I'm using amaro Torani. I feel like it's bitter. It's a 1/4 ounce. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. While being liberal means being open to new ideas and, hearing different opinions, there's this lovely insidious destruction of the original concept on dictionary.com, which includes a secondary definition. In a political context, liberal means favoring policies that are socially progressive and promote social welfare. Which, those two ideas are actually mutually exclusive, which is basically what Mises does in this throughout the rest of the book, is point out how that political context is not at all the same thing as actually being a liberal. This is a stirred cocktail. I don't have a very long review, so I jumped into the cocktail immediately. Let me stir this up for you. For me, I guess. I went with my Gadsby's Tavern cocktail glass. It just, Gadsby's Tavern, if you don't know, is where basically George Washington used to be with his buddies. I feel like that might have been where he had his, stepping down party after he resigned the presidency. Wild party by all accounts. It seemed appropriate for a liberal cocktail to go with one of the original liberals. Now, Mises makes the argument that we who are actual liberals must stop bowing to the totalitarian asshats. It's not awful. Definitely strong, but it's not awful. Not as bitter as I thought it would be. It's okay. He doesn't call them asshats. That's my word. You probably could have guessed that he didn't actually use that word. We have got to stop allowing them to call themselves liberals. They are not. They are authoritarian statists, and there is nothing progressive or liberal about the ideologies espoused on either the left or the right. And people who say they're classical liberals, stop that. Stop it. Start calling yourselves liberals and say, no, that is not a liberal. That's a totalitarian. That is not a liberal. That's a corporatist. That's somebody who actually wants the corporations to take over, even though they don't think that's what they want. Liberalism is where individuals control the means of production. Socialism is where the collective controls the means of production. History has shown, very graphically, that nothing good ever comes out of socialism. Whereas liberalism has given us the greatest number of freedoms and wealth in the world. Liberalism means exactly that. It means to be free from government interference in your life. It means to be free to hear different opinions and to speak different opinions without worry of being attacked for having to dare had a thought. Mises says, quote, "The liberals maintain that the only workable system of human cooperation in a society based on the division of labor is private ownership of the means of production," end quote. Because it is only through private ownership that true progress and advancements are made. Because when you own the property, you care what happens to the property. Just ask any landlord. Oh, I'm sorry, I know. Landlords are the bad guys. They only provide housing to people. Yes, they want to be compensated for providing that housing. That's capitalism, providing goods and services. They're providing a place to live. They expect the person who's renting it to take care of that property. How often do renters leave it in an absolute shithole? All right? Because they don't care. They don't own the property. And this book is filled with examples of how private ownership, freedom from government interference, allowing others to have freedom of expression, thought, and belief are all good things that allow society to grow. While whatever socialism does is the exact opposite. It results in an extreme contraction of progress. It's not even progressivism, it's technically regressivism. But we'll tackle one term at a time here. Let's first reclaim the concept of liberal, and then we'll worry about, calling them all regressives, which they are. It's not awful. It's probably not my favorite. I don't know that I would make it again, but it's not completely undrinkable like some that I've had. So Mises, writing in 1927, laid out what will happen as socialism is allowed to grow, following it to its horrifying logical conclusion. Mises shows how, while people envy the super rich, it's because the super rich adopt fads that those fads become popular enough for entrepreneurs to find better and cheaper ways to produce things. Things like cars, which were once considered only the province of the super wealthy, and are now owned by basically everybody. I mean, as early as 1927, half of all people had cars. Now most people have 2 or 3 cars available to them. Cost has come down. It's why energy, which is controlled by the government, costs keep rising, right? Because government grants monopolies to energy companies. It's why cable TV sucks so badly, because cable providers like Cox and Charter are granted monopolies over their areas. There's no real competition. And then you go to Poland, where they have the Wild West, and their internet rates are rock bottom, and their cable rates basically non-existent because they have so much competition over there for people's business. People have to the companies actually have to provide something good that people are willing to pay for, or else they lose customers. It's just, that's actual capitalism, not corporatism. Corporatism is what's practiced by Charter and Cox. Probably shouldn't say that. We use Charter because that's who has the monopoly in our area, and they could technically, if they got wind of this, throttle my internet speed. That's a problem for future Katrina. Capitalism is why televisions are cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Mises addresses the extreme danger of having the state educate your children, and how envy of others is at the heart of why people hate liberals. True liberals, not, the socialist statist cucks who have usurped the name of liberal. Because liberals, in allowing everyone to speak their minds, they have very open minds themselves, and the ability to think critically, the ability to determine for themselves what the truth of a matter is. Not my truth, not your truth, but the truth. Liberals don't need others to tell them what to think, and statists hate that. They hate anybody who can form a different opinion from what the statist has been told to think. And the book introduced me to etatism. It's E-T-A-T-I-S-M. I actually thought it was a typo at first. I thought it was a typo for statism, and then it popped up again and again. And so I went and I looked it up. Etatism, it was originally a French term, means the complete control of the state or a country's government over its citizens, i.e. the people who live in that country, and over the economy. Statism is very, very close, obviously. It means concentration of economic controls and planning in the hands of a highly centralized government, often extending to government ownership of industries. So the two are very closely tied, but not quite the same thing. There's a very subtle difference there. For all intents and purposes, people who are statists espouse etatism. There you go. He covers why etatism is profoundly dangerous. And consider it complete control by the government. As Mises says at this point, quote, "It is frightful to live in a state in which at every turn one is exposed to persecution masquerading under the guise of justice by a ruling majority." And yet this is exactly what we are heading towards with the constant expansion of laws that are meant to rule us, and a government trying to pacify us with positive rights. So what are positive rights? Positive rights are, quote, "rights that provide something that people need to secure their well-being." For example, the right to an education, the right to food, the right to medical care. So here's the thing. Positive rights are framed as something only the government can provide. You actually don't have the right to an education. Because if you have a right to an education, that means you have the right to have somebody teach you. And that means you are trying to conscript somebody into involuntary servitude, i.e. slavery, to teach you. You don't have that right. You also don't have the right to medical care for the exact same reason. Okay? If you have the right to medical care, that means you have the right to force somebody to take care of you medically, i.e. conscription, i.e. slavery. You don't have that right. You don't have the right to food, because that means you have the right to force somebody to work the fields and feed you, i.e. slavery. All right? You do have the right to work, earn money, and pay for those things yourselves. All right? That goes to a negative right, the right to live. But you're responsible for your own life. As Mises points out, in order for the government to provide something, it has to steal it from somebody else in the form of taxation. Because taxation is theft. Mises addresses the dangers of partisan politics and how partisan politics eventually break down into identity politics. He really did see this entire shit show coming and tried to warn us about it. 97 years ago? 88 years ago, something like that. 97 years ago. This book is about freedom. It's about true liberty and about true liberal principles. It was originally written in German, and in 1927, this was very much during the rise of the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler. He addressed the rise of fascism as well as the socialist states in both Germany and Russia. As I think he was actually living in Germany when this was written. I mean, he may have been living in Austria. Either way, I know he bolted before Hitler consolidated his power in, was it 31? I think was when he took over the chancellorship in Germany. So he bolted the country either right before or right after that. And Switzerland? He eventually ended up in the United States, but I feel like he had a layover in Switzerland beforehand. I might be wrong on that, though. I actually have a biography on Mises, but it's like 1,000 pages, so that book is quite a bit in the future at this point in time. This book, Liberalism, it was interesting. It was a little bit hard going. It was some uneven in some of his punctuation. Sounds like a little thing, but it's something I noticed. It definitely introduced me to new terms, like etatism. I genuinely thought it was a typo for statism until like the third time I saw it, and I was like, maybe that has its own meaning. Let's look this up. It was part philosophical treatise. It was part political statement. It is well written, and it covers the scope of what it means to be liberal. Not classically liberal, but an actual liberal. And as much as I enjoyed last week's book, For a New Liberty, Rothbard left me feeling jazzed for like this anarcho-liberal society. Mises addresses the very real fact that government to a certain degree is a necessary evil, because not everyone wants to play nicely while allowing everyone else to enjoy freedom. Right? There's always going to be some big swinging dick who thinks he should be in charge. And this is evidenced all around us, right? By the rise of the statists who think that Big Daddy government is going to take care of all of us. There will always be somebody who thinks he should be in charge over everybody else, and the rest of us should just let him be in charge. And in its proper role, the state makes sure that that asshole never gets the chance. Except, this is super fun, is usually the big swinging dicks who run for elected office usually win. Witness Dick A and B, right? It's true what they say. Those who seek power are rarely suited to hold it. And yet we, the little guys, keep voting the fuckers in because we're all educated by the state. It literally, everything that's happening now is an exercise in what he talks about in this book. Look around you, and you can see how if we roll back some of the shit that's going on right now, we can have this free society that we used to have here in America. That's it for this week, guys. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. Next Sunday we are doing Eisenhower. I'll see you guys then. Bye.